Today we're digging into something that sits right at the center of fly fishing, but doesn't always get explained in a simple way. Bugs. I sat down with James and Jackson from the Salmonfly Project, and we went deep into the hatches that actually matter throughout the season, and more importantly, how to fish them when it counts. This wasn't just a list of insects, this was about understanding timing, reading what's happening on the water, and making decisions that give you a real shot when the fish are feeding. This is the Wet Fly Swing podcast, where I show you the best places to travel to for fly fishing, how to find the best resources and tools to prepare for that big trip, and what you can do to give back to the fish species we all love. The Salmonfly Project team is here, and today we're going to uncover the core hatches that you should actually pay attention to and which ones you can ignore, how to fish each stage from nymph to emerger to dry without switching flies all day, what to do when nothing seems to be happening on the surface, and how their angler-driven data is changing what we know about bugs and fishing pressure. And if you stick around till the end, you're going to find out about Bugfest and what it actually feels like to eat a giant salmon fly. This episode is from a presentation that James and Jackson did as part of the Fly Fishing Bootcamp. You can watch the full presentation right now if you go to wetflyswing.com/salmonflybootcamp. Or just take a look in the show notes and get that link in the show notes, and you can watch the full presentation. If you ever want to feel more confident when bugs start coming off the water or when they don't, this one's going to help. Here they are, James Frakes and Jackson Birrell. You can find them at salmonflyproject.org. How's it going, guys?
Fantastic.
It's going great.
Nice.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. I'm excited to talk with you guys today. We've been, we did a podcast that's coming out soon, the salmonflyproject.org. You guys are doing this great, what I think for me has been a long time coming to find two guys that are just so into entomology and fly fishing. And we talked about it on the podcast, but today you're going to do a presentation. You're going to break down a little bit of the background on what entomology is, kind of everything people can understand, how it can help them maybe with fly fishing. But give us a heads up, both of you. Jackson, maybe we'll start with you. Tell us, who you are, maybe a little snippet on what you do at the Salmonfly Project.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks, Dave. So I'm our executive director and one of the co-founders. James and I started this together while we were exiting grad school. We went to grad school at the University of Montana and basically saw this need, kind of a lack of widespread aquatic insect conservation. So we started the Salmonfly Project to fill that gap. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to say what I do with the nonprofit because as a small organization, you wear a lot of hats. So do a lot of science and a lot of education and a lot of other things as well. But yeah, I love talking to other anglers about how to better match hatches and all the bug things. So nice. Really excited to hear.
Cool. All right. And how about you, James? What's your connection here?
Yeah, I'm James Frakes, one of the other co-founders. I got into this whole entomology thing because I love to fish. I was kind of a trout bum. And so I decided to study entomology at the University of Montana, fell in love with the bugs, and we've been doing this ever since.
Well, we're going to jump in a little bit today. We have a presentation, which I'm going to show really quick here. We're going to jump into that. And also, I'm just going to hop over to the website because I think you guys, if folks don't know you, we could take a look at this. So the Salmonfly Project, you can go here and you can actually, you can donate, you can check out, get some resources. And this is what it looks like here. So for those folks that are just coming in here, and I will say, when I first got on here today, the video is epic. You could sit here and you're pretty much mesmerized watching the video on these salmon flies if you let it run here. And so that's pretty cool today. People can check that out. But yeah, I think today in a bit, we're going to let people roll in here. We're going to let you guys present. And we're going to get into some of the background because I think entomology, what do you guys think is the toughest thing? I think when people come into these presentations, what do you think their expectations are and what are you guys trying to deliver on?
Our overall goal is to help anglers better be able to match the hatch, for their own fishing success. But at a deeper level, I think when you can match the hatch and really understand this connection with what the fish are feeding on and why, how those bugs are behaving. In fishing, we often try to get in the head of the fish. But it helps to also get in the mind of the bug, And when you can do both of those things and feel that connection and understand that it's dialed and why those fish are feeding on that bug at that time and how to match that, not just match the fly, but match the action and the timing and the behavior. I think that's when things really become exciting. And that's why, I'm here. I actually came into, I came here for the bugs. People ask
Yeah.
me all the time, what's your connection to fly fishing? I'm more of a casual angler. James's, route to the Salmonfly Project was kind of opposite. When I started doing research, I was, very, very new at fly fishing. So yeah, I love helping people just find that wonder of the bugs and be able to connect the bugs to the fish at a deeper level. And then once they do, they become better stewards of the environment. You're aware of the hatches that are there. You're aware of the pressures and any changes that happen, and you just become, a more invested, more involved steward. So I
Nice.
think it's cool from a variety of levels.
Right on. Right on. Well said. Yeah. And I pulled up the video so we were able to take a look at some of those stoneflies. That's what is interesting about this, right? You can go so deep down these rabbit holes into species and subspecies and life history, right? All this stuff. And you guys are at the kind of that high level, right? Because master, you got multiple degrees studying these, in this field. But I think today you're going to break it down for like the normal people, right? You're going to kind of shed some light on how all of us people that don't have degrees in entomology can understand and maybe get some use out of it. Is that how you guys look at it a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. We want this to be fun and a good learning experience. You don't have to memorize any Latin names or anything crazy like that. And you definitely don't need to do that to effectively match the hatch. Sometimes entomology gets this sort of stigma of being like really kind of an old person's sort of stodgy subject. And it doesn't have to be. It's fun. It's cool. I think that's what we're trying to, show today.
Well, I just want to give a heads up before we get in here. So this is part of the today is day 3 on our fly fishing boot camp, and we're covering a bunch of different topics. Later tonight, we've got a streamer presentation about trout is going to be here, James Garrettson. So that's going to be awesome tonight. And then we're going to take a break tomorrow. Monday, we'll be back with Stillwater. We're going to do some panfish. We got a mix of things going. So we're trying to cover everything in fly fishing. So that's the boot camp. We are doing a little Q&A at the end here, so if anybody has questions, just put them in the comments. I'm going to save those till the end. I'm going to let you guys present here. And then, like I said, we're going to give away a rod Monday night, and just follow the Salmonfly Project for a chance to win that. We'll be circling around there. Yeah, well, guys, does that sound about good? Maybe give us a heads up on, obviously you guys are a big group trying to protect species. A big thing about supporting you supports conservation because we're protecting some of these. Are there any other groups you would recommend we check out on the conservation end that'd be good to support?
There's an amazing array of people out there doing important fisheries conservation work. We work a ton with Trout Unlimited, as well as dozens of watershed groups. So yeah, big shout out to all the people doing the good work, and all the work that we do. It's very collaborative, and we're not doing it in isolation. So yeah, we all need to work together. So yeah, we're big proponents of Trout Unlimited. We work with them at a national scale, at a chapter scale, and for the beginner intermediate anglers that are here today, when I go to these Trout Unlimited meetings and talk with them, there's not a whole lot of young people, it's there's a lot of white hair in the room, and that's cool.
Right.
But I think, getting more of the, people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s that want to be stewards and fish and enjoy these ecosystems for years to come, like get involved. There's volunteer opportunities. It's not just like a money thing. There's so many opportunities to do restoration projects, collect data. So I'd be thrilled, even if people didn't support the Salmonfly Project. Let's save our rivers,
Exactly. Yeah. And that's something I'm guessing you guys will touch on a little bit today, of changing environmental conditions affecting some of these bugs. We've heard stories. The podcast that we have will come out next month. We go deep. We're going to take a deep dive on some of these topics, which was great. So we'll have that coming too. I think we could just jump into this if you guys are ready, and I'll let you, I'll switch over to the slideshow. I'll let you jump in here, and then we'll get some questions at the end. Does that sound like a good plan?
Sounds
good to go. All right. So I've got your slideshow pulled up here. Who's going to start off? Jackson, is that you? Or are you going to start this one off?
Yeah, I'll start this one off, and then, James will take over from there. But as usual, James, if there's anything that you really want to add, feel free. But yeah, just as a, separate or additional introduction to the Salmonfly Project, we are an aquatic insect conservation nonprofit. Our mission is to conserve our aquatic insects, essentially our hatches and the fisheries they support. A lot of people ask us about our name, and that comes from, this amazing species of stonefly that hatches really throughout the West, the United States, but famous to the Western US. They're big, they're cool, they make amazing fishing opportunities because they emerge in in synchrony, and they are declining. So it's not like the Salmonfly Project really only does research on salmon flies. We try to protect all of our hatches, mayflies, stoneflies, caddisflies, particularly on our trout streams. So before we get into the practicalities of matching hatches and getting into the entomology, I do want to focus a little bit more at a really basic level about why conserve aquatic insects in general. And then most of our time is going to be really focused in helping you all listening learn about entomology. But the first aspect of why conserve aquatic insects is certainly, as we all know, we need aquatic insects to feed our fish. They feed the fish that we love to catch. But it's not just having enough food. One thing that's really important is having a diversity of food. So if we look at the different emergences of aquatic insects, trout, we need to understand, are cool but lazy creatures. When you're out in the wild, it's all about survival and reproduction. And as many of you know, these trout operate in these calmer waters wherever they can, these feeding lanes to eat available food items. And why a diversity of insects is important, because as these insects emerge from the water as winged adults and make a hatch, those insects are easy pickings, right? And that's why we like to fish hatches. That's why trout rise. If it wasn't easy, trout wouldn't do it. So sometimes when we talk to people, people think about like, oh, there just needs to be an abundance of bugs. Well, there also needs to be a diversity of bugs, because those different species emerge at different times and create easy feeding opportunities throughout different parts of the year. And that's particularly important throughout the summer, when stream temperatures are warm, metabolism is high, and the trout need to eat a lot, and to eat a lot without moving around and expending a lot of energy. So it goes beyond just abundance, it goes to diversity as well. And then getting beyond fishing, insects are also the staple of other ecosystems. 70% of all birds eat insects, and many of those are aquatic. Aquatic insects, we always say there's infinite reasons to get behind saving the hatch, saving aquatic insects. All of these insects, just a little bit of ecology here and how they take care of our streams, they eat different food items. So depending on your species, some species will eat rotting debris, whether that's leaves or wood. Others scrape the algae off of rocks. Others are filter feeders and filter little bits and pieces of stuff floating through the water. Others are predators. And when you have an abundance and a diversity of these critters, they keep the river literally clean, healthy, and functioning how it should. From a diversity perspective, if you take all of the freshwater animals on Earth and you add up all of the species, over 70% of all freshwater species on planet Earth are insects. So we always joke around and say, if you round up, everything in the water is an insect, which of course isn't true. But it does put it into perspective, just the number of species and their importance. From a more practical perspective, aquatic insects are also indicators of water quality. Now, what does this mean? So when we go and sample a river, we're not just looking for the abundance and the diversity of these bugs, but we pay attention to how sensitive each species is to pollution. Many species are highly sensitive. They disappear when the environment starts to change. This is especially true of stoneflies, as well as many kinds of mayflies and caddis. And then other species like sowbugs, scuds, leeches, worms, midges, they tend to be much more tolerant of polluted or disturbed ecosystems. So when we move into a watershed, we pay a lot of attention to that, because they are, the more sensitive ones are the canaries in the current, the canaries in the coal mine, if you will. And they let us know, based on their presence of different species, how the river is doing, even before trout might be impacted. These species, many of them are much more sensitive than trout. So we can use them as early warning signals, and then capitalize on that and change whatever is causing these subtle shifts in the bug communities to change, and keep our fisheries healthy for even longer and more thoroughly, preserve our dry fly fishing opportunities, the hatches, and all that entails. So we like to begin with that of the why behind the Salmonfly Project. It connects to our fishing opportunities, our economies, our recreation, but also this massive piece of our ecosystem. So finally, let's transition from the why care to what is entomology and really tailor this to the anglers. So at the most basic level, entomology is the study of insects. And fly fishing gives you this really opportunity to study insects, to get in the mind of the bugs. Because if you could understand their life history, their behavior, and at a really basic level, how to separate the major groups, you can make a lot of improvement in your fishing game because you can have a game plan. You can anticipate hatches. You can anticipate feeding opportunities by trout. So we like to say it's not just picking, a bug natural and matching it to a fly. You have to know what is happening and why. So that's why we call it a study. That study of insects can be really relevant to angling. And by insects, okay, so what do we mean by insects? All insects, at least in their adult form, that means the form with wings, all the bugs that live in the water, nymphs, larvae, that's what we call immatures. Those are the babies. But at least as adults, they have 6 legs, they have wings, they have antennae. They live within this exoskeleton that protects them. And then they have 3 distinct body segments, a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. Really basic level. So when you compare that to scuds and amphipods and leeches, they don't meet those characteristics. So those are different. So most of our insects that we care about in fly fishing are stoneflies, mayflies, caddisflies, and then a big group of bugs called true flies, which includes your midges and your crane flies and a whole bunch of other critters as well that usually aren't as relevant to trout. So in the next part, we want to go through, these major groups, and probably the most relevant groups are what we call the big 3. Mayflies, stoneflies, and caddisflies. And this is the only Latin I'm going to throw at you today. And the reason why we're throwing a little bit of Latin at you is because when you go into some of the science entomology literature, you see this abbreviation EPT, and that stands for Ephemeroptera for mayflies, Plecoptera for stoneflies, and Trichoptera for caddisflies. Those are the Latin versions of these common names in English that we're used to saying. And EPT as a whole, as I already kind of talked about, tend to be sensitive to environmental degradation, pollution, however you want to say it. And when we have a lot of EPT, that means it's an indication that the river is healthy. So you see that vernacular quite a bit if you start going into the science. So we like to throw out that a little bit, but that's about as deep into the Latin where I'm going to really push people here. All right, so let's talk about these major groups, EPT, and then we'll kind of go to the midge group hereafter. So mayflies, who are we dealing with here? A lot of people think about, mayflies, they hear about these common hatches, blue-winged olives, March browns, green drakes, trichos, whatever it is, and we call those species. Well, there's actually 3,500 species of mayflies found throughout the world. These are diverse, large groups of organisms. Mayfly is not a species. That's what we call an order. It's a lot of critters that live in different environments. They have different behaviors, different requirements in their ecosystem. So we like to point that out first of all. And mayflies are really, really fascinating, not only because they tend to be sensitive to environmental pollution and they're eaten by trout, but they're amazing creatures. They are the oldest kind of flying insect. They predate the continents we know today. They predate dinosaurs. They predate flowers. They are ancient critters, and they're just really cool. I love their life histories. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. Kind of an ancient and basic life history, different life stages. So before we get into that, though, let's talk about basic identification. So we're going to focus on, at the first part of the talk, how to identify mayflies, stoneflies versus caddisflies. Because if you can do that level of identification, that level of entomology, and learn how they behave differently, their life histories, that's what really empowers you for that first stage of matching the hatch. You don't really have to know every single species and subspecies because overall, mayflies, stoneflies, and caddisflies within each group behave similarly. And that's really relevant to how each hatch happens. So let's first focus on mayflies versus stoneflies. If you go into the, entomology books and you talk to other entomologists, you might hear, that you need to count the tails of your mayflies versus stoneflies to tell them apart, or look at how many claws they have. If you have a microscope, that is helpful, but how many of us have a microscope at home or especially on the water with us? Not very many. So there is a really easy trait to think about when telling mayfly and stonefly nymphs, the water form, apart. So when you look at a mayfly, so if you see the head, the thorax, and the abdomen, that middle section, it's kind of fused. There aren't three distinct segments of that thorax. But if you compare that to a stonefly, you see the head, and then you see three distinct chunks or segments behind the head. So mayflies, their thorax is fused. You can't easily tell the segments of that thorax apart. Stoneflies, head, 1, 2, 3. And as long as the bugs are big enough to see, that's going to be the best identifiable feature that,
that's it. So that's our best. If you grab one in the stream, that fused thorax of the mayfly is the best differentiator.
Yep. Whether it's a blue-winged olive or a trico or a green drake or, whatever, the size and the overall body shape will differ. But if you look at the thorax, that's going to help you. For mayfly adults, I think most of us are pretty good at identifying that. They look like little sailboats. Their wings stick straight up in the air as these little triangles. They can have 2 or 3 tails, and that can help you get to different species groups. But if you see an adult with a sailboat wing, mayfly for sure. Mayflies, especially in their nymph form, can have different habits, and that relates to how they move around. So, and then their body shape, and that depends. That can be relevant to the fly that you tie on, and especially the action and where it lives. So, clingers are a big group of mayflies that live on the tops of rocks, and they're shaped like sports cars, right? They're aerodynamic, really hydrodynamic. Their body is really flattened on top of the rock, and that allows the water to go right over them, right? If they're higher, like a normal mayfly, like a green drake, if you know what that looks like, it's going to get blown away, or like a stonefly or a crawler mayfly. These clingers have a shovel-shaped head and are right on the top of the rock, living in what's called the boundary layer. Swimmers, they like to be under the rocks. They are really good at living in still water habitats, and they kind of swim around, right? So if they exist in a stream or river, they don't swim around as much. The flow is going to blow them away, but they're good at swimming. They're much more prevalent in ponds and lakes. Burrowers, too, are more prevalent in ponds and lakes, and they actually don't live on the rocks or whatever. They dig burrows down into the silt, and these are wild critters. I could go on, talk about them for a long time. They make these curly Q C-shaped burrows, and they sit in there and wiggle their gills, and that makes a vacuum, and it pulls water in, and that's how they eat. They're pulling water through their little C-shaped tube and filter feeding whatever comes in, and then the excrement flows out. Pretty neat. And then crawlers are more your typical bug that just lives on and under the rocks, crawling around. They don't have as many. They're more basic in their morphology. They don't have any special like swimming, burrowing, or clinging adaptations.
Golden Fly Shop isn't your average fly shop. They have a 12-foot shark painted like a cutthroat hovering over a huge selection of the best rods in the business, a massive assortment of tying materials, and their famous steakhouse streamer display. And it's the hub for a community of anglers who never stop tinkering with new ways to catch fish. With a growing online store and a budding YouTube channel, you'll be able to follow along with their fun antics, international adventures, and helpful fly fishing tips. Golden Fly Shop, where the community is hanging out, even if they're supposed to be working. That's goldenflyshop.com. Check them out right now. Trout Routes by Onyx is built for fly anglers who want better intel without spending hours digging for the information. You'll get access to public land maps, stream access points, regulations, and even road and trail maps all in one place. It's become my go-to app for scouting new trips. You can check them out right now. Go to wetflyswing.com/troutroutes and download the app today.
So let's think about the life history of mayflies. It is a little bit complex, more so than a lot of the other groups. But what's fun for fishing is that you can capitalize on every stage of this life cycle. So all aquatic insects, of course, start from an egg, and then they become a nymph. And the sole purpose of that nymph is to eat and therefore grow and grow and grow. And for each species, they're going to emerge at a predictable time in the year that depends really on the cumulative load of temperature throughout their life. So in a warm year, they're going to emerge a little bit earlier. In a cool year, they're going to emerge a little bit later. That just is dictated by temperature's effect on their metabolism and how fast they can grow. And because they're all experiencing in a certain reach of river, similar temperature, they're growing at similar rates, and therefore they come out during a certain season. So that's really relevant to hatch charts. That's why hatch charts exist. We can predict hatches of different species, and they come out on different times of the year depending on their biology. But when these nymphs are ready to emerge, once they're fully grown, they swim to the surface. Some are faster swimmer than others, like the swimmer nymphs, the swimmer mayflies like blue-winged olives, for instance, swim quicker. Things like PMDs or green drakes are much worse at swimming, and it takes them longer to get to the surface. So that's, of course, when feeding really upticks for trout, because these nymphs are no longer hiding, and now they're drifting in the current, and that means game on. So these nymphs, most nymphs of mayflies are quite small, and it takes them a long time to break through the surface foam, through that surface tension, and get part of their body sticking up into the air. And then they go through metamorphosis. They get their wings. They crawl out of that old skin, and their wings kind of unfold. And that process takes a long time, first getting through the surface film, and then going through metamorphosis, and then drying their wings so they can fly away. And that's really relevant to trout because that takes so long, literally a couple of minutes, the trout just set up in feeding lanes. And how do they feed on mayflies? They sip, right? I think we've all seen that. Before the mayflies really successfully poke through the surface tension, they're feeding first kind of under the water. And then as soon as those mayflies are on top of the water and are drifting down with their sailboat-like wings drying, those rises are a little bit easier to see, but they're still sips, just because those mayflies, it's kind of a reliable food source. They're not going to escape quickly, so they just set up and they feed gently, trying to conserve that energy. That first adult stage of a mayfly getting its wings is called the dun. When those wings are dry and fully unfurled, the sole purpose of that dun is to fly to shore. And then it goes through a second metamorphosis, and that becomes the spinner, right? So the nymph becomes a dun, which then becomes a spinner. So this is obviously really relevant to fly fishing, because the first stage, you're fishing the nymph, and then you're fishing emergers and cripples. Cripples are nymphs that fail to go through metamorphosis, so they get kind of waterlogged and float along there half out of their old skin. And then you can fish the duns with those wings straight up in the air, and then find the spinners. And the spinners are the first stage that's reproductively active. So they fly from the margins of the river, where they went through that dun to spinner metamorphosis. And mayflies have this famous flying pattern where they go up and down, right? And that's where the word spinner comes from. They spin like this, and they all come together in a big clump, and the males and the females are mating in the air. And then once those eggs are fertilized, the females drop to lay those eggs. And that's your classic spinner fall. Another opportunity for those trout to feed. The males will just mate and mate and mate until they can't fly anymore, and they will fall too. And the spinners, they look a lot different on the water than the duns, because life is essentially over for them. Mayflies only live for 24 hours. They reproduce just once, and they do that until they can't anymore. And then it's a spent spinner, and those legs or those wings are now lying flat on the water, going downstream.
Is there a more common part of the hatch to fish? Do you think like the spinners versus the duns, is there a more common or a better, or does it depend?
It's definitely species specific. Yeah, that I'll get into that a little bit more at the end of this talk. But certain species, the spinner can be more important, and certain species, the duns are for sure more important.
Good. Yeah, we were just on a podcast earlier today, and we were talking about the tricos, and they were saying like how fishing that trico, like early morning they come out, right? They're hard to fish, but the spinner fall is perfect if you hit it early.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, good. Okay, that's cool.
Yep. So it does. It depends. Classic biologist answer too, right? It depends.
Right. It depends.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so moving on to stoneflies, another 3,500 species. Stoneflies, on average, tend to be the most sensitive to environmental degradation. Another reason why it made a good namesake and flagship for our organization. You know, the salmonfly is one particularly sensitive organism. It too is quite ancient and shares a lot of similarities in its biology with mayflies that we'll get to here in a minute with its life history. But let's go back to how to identify these bugs. So if we just go to the nymph form, going back to the 1, 2, 3 thorax segment, just showing those pictures of a tricho mayfly versus a nocturnal stonefly. Mayflies have that fused thorax segment. Stoneflies have a really obvious 1, 2, 3 thorax segments behind the head, and that'll get it every time. They also have 2 really obvious tails that don't easily smush together. Mayflies, most of them, have 3 tails. Some have 2 as nymphs, but it's often hard to see them when you pull them out of the water because they kind of glue together with the surface tension of the water. But stoneflies do have a really obvious 2 tail. As adults, pretty much all stoneflies look on average the same, despite body size and color differences. It's this classic insecty appearance with the heavily veined wings laying flat over the abdomen. So how do stoneflies go through their life cycle? As mayflies, everything else, they start from an egg and then they go through their nymphal stage. Pretty much all stoneflies are crawlers. There aren't really burrowing stoneflies nor clinger stoneflies that live on the tops of the rocks. There aren't swimmer mayflies. They have a really similar kind of behavior and movement style. But when a particular stonefly species is ready to hatch, emerge, instead of swimming up the water column, the vast majority of stonefly species crawl to the bank or up like emergent logs, vegetation, rocks. And that's actually why they're called stoneflies, because you see the old exoskeletons or shucks of those stoneflies hanging out the rocks. People talk about that with the bigger stoneflies all the time. Golden stones, salmon flies, those shucks, as long as it doesn't rain, will hang out for weeks and weeks and weeks on the rocks, just laying there. So those stoneflies, they emerge bankside. And that's actually really important because if you imagine, remember, stoneflies are sensitive to pollution and they're sensitive to low oxygen. Most stoneflies love to live in riffles, and that is a fast-flowing environment. And that means that before they're hatched, they have to crawl from the middle of the river through all sorts of fast water to the margins. And there's a lot of them that get washed off. And that's why, one of the reasons why, particularly fishing the salmonfly hatch, can be really frustrating for people, because sometimes there are all these salmon flies flying around and even laying eggs on the water, and the fish aren't feeding on them. And people say, why? And it's because a lot of the time they are full. They have already engorged eating salmon fly nymphs. Similar things can happen with goldens, but it's not as prevalent.
I've heard these stories about fish where they eat so many bugs, it's like they're almost like puking up bugs, right? They just stuff themselves. But salmon flies, that'd be hard to do, right? I guess because they're so big.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I've been sent like videos and pictures and kind of see yourself. Sometimes you can feel them and see the salmon flies like moving around.
Oh, wow.
Inside.
Oh, that's crazy.
It's pretty wild.
Amazing.
So sometimes people get more success. James might talk about this, fishing other little attractor patterns or like little caddis nymphs during the salmonfly hatch because they're like full of salmon flies. They don't want to see another one. And maybe they're just curious about what that little thing is floating through the water.
Oh, there you go. Nice.
But sometimes, anyway, James is probably going to want to cover that in the species level stuff. So salmon flies or stoneflies, excuse me, they come out, they go through metamorphosis, they fly to the bank, or they're already on the bank. They mate on the bank, so on the rocks, on the vegetation, and then they come back to the water. The females do, and most species kind of splat on the water, or they skitter on the water, and that's the action of those females putting their egg sac into the water, and the eggs float away. So because those females are moving quite fast, and because stoneflies are often quite large, trout will feed more actively, more aggressively, splashier on stoneflies than mayflies. And that's simply because partially of size and partially because they're moving a lot more. Those mayflies don't really move around when they're on the water because they're either drying their wings or they're pretty much already dead as spent spinners. Okay, useless bug fact number 1. We like to interject these random little fun stories of bugs throughout our talks. And this is to paint the picture of just how wild these critters are. We're used to seeing like documentaries of, lions chasing gazelle and stuff in the Serengeti. Like it's a Serengeti down there underneath your wading boots. So here's a story about one of your classic summer caddis, spotted sedges. In a lot of streams, this is the most abundant aquatic insect in the water. We're going to talk about caddis more in a second, but these larvae, they can spin silk, just like moths, some moths and butterflies. And they make this amazing underwater tube, almost like a tubular spider web. And you can see what this guy literally spinning some silk and making this home. It lives in there, and it sets that up in a feeding lane, and the flow brings debris or little mayflies or little midges, algae into that web, and it simply just lives in there and eats and eats and eats. And you can imagine it's a lot of work to make a house in a riffle in flowing water. They need that flowing water to bring their food to them. It's a lot of work, and it takes time. So these spotted sedges, these larvae are really, really territorial, and sometimes they will try and steal another web that's in a more optimal feeding lane, or if its web was destroyed by like a rock or maybe your boot and it has to start over again. So there's this fascinating, like really crazy stuff that happens. So you'll have one that's a caddis that's in its home, another one comes along, and then it's like a battle of the bands. It's called stridulation. It's what crickets do. Crickets chirp. Instead of rubbing their legs together, like a lot of crickets and grasshoppers or whatever, or their wings together, these guys will rub their claw on these bumps on their chin, and it makes a chirp. And they will have a chirp off. And the louder the chirp, the bigger, the badder the bug. And if the invader chirps loud enough, the one in the net will crawl up and float away. And it'll either like get eaten by a trout or it'll float somewhere else, and then it has to make its net over again. Crazy. But if they chirp equally and are equally like aggressive in that way, then it's literally war, and they wrestle. And then one will get chucked into the flow, and then the winner will hang out in that net.
Can humans hear the chirping?
No, not like no. You because you're in the water.
How would you guys hear it? Do you have? How do you have? Can you get like
so
mics?
This is like from free research. I've never set myself up to hear.
Gotcha.
Hear
Yeah. This is like serious level research document.
Yeah. But just even knowing it happens, and like I'm super nerdy, so sometimes I'll like snorkel through trout streams and just like
look for it.
Bugs doing their thing. But yeah, a lot of the time we think these bugs, just because they're underwater, they're just living these boring like lives.
They're bugs. Like how smart are these little critters, right? They're just bugs.
They do wild stuff, and that's just one example. So it's a wilderness down there underneath your boots. Just remember that.
This is a great segment. The useless bug fact, I can tell you that right there. I'm not going to forget that one. That's killer.
Okay, so finally getting to caddis. So that's one kind of caddis. Lots of other kinds, October caddis and Mother's Day caddis, lots of different kinds. But caddis are a lot more diverse species-wise than mayfly stoneflies. We have 17,000 species worldwide, and they can be either net spinning or free living, or they can have a case. And the ones with a case spin silk to glue together rocks or sticks in some species-specific construction. And they literally pick up rocks and they fit it onto their case as they're growing, as they need to expand it. If it doesn't fit, they throw it, downstream, and then they try and find another one. They're pretty smart little critters. And they create these cases to protect themselves, not against fish, but against stoneflies. Many stoneflies, all of your squala, your goldens, your yellow sallies, those are predators. So they protect themselves against it, and they can crawl inside like a turtle. But they don't grow their case like a turtle or a snail. They make it. And caddis have also a fascinating kind of biology here. So how to identify caddis? We always say that they're grubby, kind of maggoty looking things as larvae. Obviously, if you see a critter in a case, that helps you get the first step, but many of them don't live in a case, and they're grubby, but they have legs. And that's an important thing to remember when we talk about midges or crane flies or other things. And so larvae, grub-like with legs, they have a pupae. If you see anything that looks like this crazy alien thing in the middle, that's a pupae. That's intermediate larval to adult stage. And then the adults look a lot like moths, but their wings are held tent-like over the abdomen, and then they have long antennae. So they go through quite a different life history than mayflies or stoneflies because they have this pupa. So they start as eggs, they're larvae, they grow and grow and grow, and eventually they spin a cocoon, just like a moth or a butterfly, chrysalis or cocoon, and then they turn to soup inside that cocoon, and they grow their wings from scratch, right? And all of their other, body parts. And when that adult is fully formed inside the pupal skin, they cut a hole through that cocoon and they swim to the surface. And they're really good swimmers. So they swim quite rapidly, often more rapidly than most mayflies. And they can often get an air bubble that around their pupa that helps them come up a little bit faster. And given the velocity of that, upward motion, they poke themselves quite quickly through the surface film. And the head of that pupal chamber is now air exposed. And it's like a porthole. The adult will cut the old skin open and emerge out of it like a little porthole, a little tunnel. And then it'll quickly fly away. So unlike a mayfly, mayflies are sitting in that surface film for a while and taking a long time to go through metamorphosis and taking a long time to dry their wings. The whole action of emergers and then the process of becoming an adult is much, much, much quicker in an adult. And that's why people talk about a caddis rise. It's a much splashier rise form. And that's just because these caddis are kind of disappearing into the air much quicker, so the trout have to be quick. So you can often tell what the trout are feeding on, even if you don't know what's hatching from the hatch chart, or if you don't even see the bug. If you see these consistent splashes.
By how the big the splash, like almost a more aggressive splash of a trout,
exactly.
Like a caddis.
Exactly. You're exactly right. So then the adults, they're really good at flying, just like a moth. They fly to the bank. They don't mate in the air. They don't make like a big cloud of mate. There can be a lot of them, and that kind of makes a cloud that way, but they don't make like a formation like the mayflies do. They mate on the bank, and then the females fly back to the water. And depending on the species, they either kind of skitter and splat the eggs off of them like a stonefly. But many species, including those spotted sedges, actually dive. The females dive underwater and they lay their eggs, as kind of this picture shows, in custom like sweet spots on the sides of logs, rocks. You can actually have caddis hit your waders and crawl down underwater, and they think you're a rock and they're going to, put eggs on your boots. That's what they're trying to do. So a lot of people have success, not just fishing emergers and then adults and larvae, but also these wet flies with some action on it as the kind of mimicking these adults coming down and then back up out of the water, laying eggs. So pretty fascinating stuff. True flies. We're almost done with my section. 50,000 species of true flies. That's a lot of species. Most are not super relevant to anglers. We have two big groups. We have midges and crane flies. On average, true flies tend to be a lot more pollution tolerant. And pretty easy to identify this big group of organisms. When you look at the larvae, they look grubby and they don't have legs. So that's how you kind of separate them from caddis. Caddis are grubby with legs. True flies are grubby without legs. And the adults, most of the species we fly fish with, they look like kind of like mosquitoes. Midges are a little tiny. Crane flies are usually quite big. And their life history is similar to the caddis. They exist in a larval stage. They come up as a fast-rising pupa. They emerge quickly into their adult form, and then they lay their eggs back in the water. And this can be pretty cool, this process, for the midges in particular, because there can be a lot of them. And as those females kind of put the eggs on the water and hang out, there can be so many of them that they clump together. So that's why you can fish caddis or midge clusters, simply because they kind of mix together and stick to each other on the top of the water in the surface film. We also have a lot of beetles that live underwater. The vast majority of those aren't relevant to fly fishing, but they do exist. Some rivers, dragonflies and damselflies can be important. And then just shout out to your other aquatic critters. There can be a lot of like true bugs, water skippers, hellgrammites, even some kinds of moths. But the vast majority of these other kinds of aquatic insects aren't as important for your angler entomology journey on most trout streams. So the final group, we have a lot of non-insects. We call these non-insect macroinvertebrates. So these are still bugs that you can see with your naked eye under the water, but they're not insects. They don't have these two stages with the wing stage and then the larval stage. They don't have 6 legs. Some of them, never have legs at all. So these are worms, leeches, snails, crayfish, scuds, sow bugs, things like that. Can be really relevant for fishing, but they don't make fishable hatches. And on average, the vast majority of these critters, if there's a lot of them, it's an indication that parts of the ecosystem have been degraded, usually relevant to not enough oxygen. That's most frequent.
Awesome. Well, nice work, Jackson. Thank you for the background there.
That was killer. Let's switch over. So James, you're going to take over now and hit into another section here.
Yeah, so this second section is kind of trying to build off of the basics that Jackson just laid out, and we're going to talk more specifically about particular hatches, and I'm going to try and shed some knowledge on specific angling tips to focus on particular hatches. And I do want to just let your listeners know this is very Western focused, right? Mm-hmm. Like all of our research is around the West, and so we kind of tailored this to be a Western focused part of the presentation. But there are some amazing resources that you guys should get into. I'll just highlight this one book that I
see it.
Love. This is Hatches. This is a book.
Oh, there we go.
It talks about a bunch of different hatches around.
Okay. And who are the authors on that?
This is Al Kwaki and Bob Vistasi.
Okay.
And this originally came out in the 70s. They did a revamp when they redid all the taxonomy for a lot of the mayfly species. So there's a bunch of different books, and you can get deeper into this. And I encourage your listeners to go down the wormhole, because this is awesome. Yeah. So like I said, we're going to talk about how to anticipate and how to fish specific hatches in this sort of second half of the segment. I'd like to just start by showing a hatch chart. This is a hatch chart that was developed for the Madison River. We do a lot of research on the Madison, and this is a really well-detailed hatch chart. For those anglers who maybe aren't super familiar with how to read hatch charts, you've got the seasons up top, and then the blue shaded in areas are the times when you may expect to see those bugs out on a particular river. Mm-hmm. Now, each hatch chart really should be tailored for a particular river because, like Jackson said, the sole thing that drives an insect emergence is the temperature of the water, right? It's the accumulation of degree days, how long they've been in the water under certain temperatures that dictates when a hatch will occur. And of course, each river has a different thermal signature. So each river should have its own hatch chart. This one is designed specifically for the Madison River.
On those hatch charts, do you find that all major rivers out there in the West have something like that, hatch charts?
Yeah, I mean, I'd ask your local fly shop, and people should have some kind of a hatch chart. Most good fly shops will also have like a daily report. They'll have a chalkboard or something that explains where they're at seasonally with the hatch and things like that.
Perfect.
Okay, so now we're going to just kind of go back through and talk about these particular insect groups and when is the best time to fish them. So midges, I think a lot of people know midges for the fact that they hatch throughout the winter time. This is kind of our only dry fly opportunity in the middle of the winter, and that's why they're fun. They provide a fun fishing opportunity at a time when otherwise there wouldn't be that many fish rising. one key feature to look for when you're out there midge fishing is, people think that, you want to have these really sunny, warm days in the wintertime for your fishing. And that actually is not always the case. Sometimes if you have like a gray day or a storm rolls in, that can drive a hatch of midges. And a lot of times when you have that gray, nastier weather, the trout just feel a little bit more comfortable to rise. And so don't be afraid to go out there, put your nasty weather gear on and go fish out there in some nasty weather, and you may actually have some really good fishing. The hatch for midges in the wintertime tends to occur right at the warmest part of the day, because obviously the adults don't want to freeze in midair. And of course, one of the main things that I like to tell people to do is try and track these hatches throughout the day. So let's say if you know that the midge hatch is going to occur, let's say around 2 p.m., 3 p.m., but you get to the river at 10 a.m., you probably want to start fishing with a larvae pattern down on the bottom. And you might want to fish 2 flies. You could fish a larvae and a pupa, but fish those things down low near the bottom because those bugs are still near the substrate. And then right before the hatch occurs, it can be very effective to put a midge pupil pattern. And the difference between the pupa and the larvae is just they have this much more pronounced thorax area. They kind of look more like an ice cream cone as opposed to just like a hot dog. And you can fish that up in the surface film, can be really good right before the hatch. Fish will start to look up. Let's talk similarly about mayflies, making a lot of broad assumptions here because mayflies, there's so many different types and there's so many different ways to target them. From my experience, being out there again on cloudy, humid days can be really effective. That has to do with the fact that when they break out of their nymphal shuck right here, if it's humid out, it takes them even longer to dry off those wings, and it will actually let them sit on the water for even longer. And the longer the bug is, trapped in the surface film or drying its wings off, the trout pay more attention to that because they know that they have more time to feed on those bugs. So yeah, go out there in nasty weather again. The other thing I like to bring up is the difference between the duns and the spinners. So one thing, each species is a little bit different on what time of year they hatch and the water temperature at which the duns hatch. But there is sort of like a pattern between when the duns come out and when the spinners come out. And that's really driven by water temperature for the duns, right? The nymphs are experiencing the temperature of the water. But then when the spinners come out, it's the temperature of the air that dictates when the spinners will fall and come back to the water surface. And that tends to occur between 60 and 70 degrees. So if you have a spinner fall, or if let's say it's the middle of the summertime, you're never going to really find a spinner fall right in the middle of the day because it's just too hot out and those spinners are still over on the banks. The spinner falls in summertime tend to occur in the evening. And then as you get later into the summer, a lot of times the spinner falls can happen early morning when that air temperature is desirable for them. Let's talk about stoneflies. Jackson touched on this quite a bit about fishing the nymphs as they crawl to the sides of the river before they emerge. That can be really effective. If you know that a hatch is about to occur, fishing like a really short chain in shallow water right along the banks can be super effective with the stonefly nymphs. We call like a egg-laying flight when the females come back and actually skitter to the surface of the water. That tends to happen on sunny days, warm afternoons. You don't tend to see a lot of egg layers back on the water when it's really nasty weather. So it's kind of the opposite as the mayflies. You want to be out there kind of nicer weather. Warm afternoons is when that occurs.
What was that you said on the bank, near the bank? What was the bug you were fishing? You said something close to the bank.
Yeah, fishing the nymphs of whatever adult form is going. So if it was a salmonfly emergence that was going to happen, you'd probably want to fish like a size 4 Pat's rubber legs or something like that, right on
right
the
off
edge.
the bank.
Yep.
Yep. What about under trees? They seem to be good places. I guess that's more they're falling out. The adults are falling off of the trees and into the water when you got overhang, stuff like that.
Yeah. And a lot of times the structure, the best fishing happens over structure because you got to remember the trout themselves want to have some cover.
Some cover, right.
Yeah. So that they can, you never really tend to see trout out in the middle in a bright sunny day rising because, they're scared of the birds.
Discover the Montana Fly Fishing Lodge, nestled along the federally designated wild and scenic East Rosebud River with 1.5 miles of exclusive private frontage. Their all-inclusive luxury experiences combine world-class fly fishing on legendary waters like the Yellowstone, the Bighorn, and Stillwater rivers with rustic elegance in their spacious lodge and luxurious canvas cabins. With capacity for up to 18 guests, private Spring Creek stock trout ponds, and a fully equipped fly shop, every detail is designed for the perfect Montana escape. You can book now and experience that ultimate combination of responsible fishing practices, breathtaking scenery, and unmatched hospitality at Montana's premier fly fishing destination. You can head over to montanaflyfishinglodge.com right now and check in with them and see what they have available. That's montanaflyfishinglodge.com.
Okay, moving along, talking about caddis. So caddis are an interesting group. There's so many different types of caddis. Everybody sort of just talks about the caddis hatch and they don't get super specific on them. And I think that's kind of funny because there's just so many different species. But the reason for that is because all of the adults sort of tend to look very similar. They all kind of look like little moths. You need to tie a variety of sizes and colors and you can pretty much match a caddis hatch. A lot of times in the summer, you'll find caddis hatching later on into the evening, even after dark can be really good. And Jackson did kind of mention this, but you have both these pupa, which is this phase that's intermediate between the larvae and the adult. And those move really fast and they're subsurface and they're moving around quite a bit. And then you also have these egg layers that will dive down and the trout will cue in on both of those phases. And a really effective way to fish both of those phases is using wet flies, kind of like more gooey, submerged patterns. You can do dry dropper with a wet fly on the back, and it's often that wet fly that gets taken more than the full dry because the trout knows if there's a high riding dry fly on the top and it's a caddis, it's likely going to fly off before it can get there. And they'll go after the pupae and the egg layers just because they spend longer in the water. Okay, we've hit another totally random bug fact. This is kind of goes back to some of the research that I did when I was still in grad school. I was working with a researcher up at the Flathead Lake Biostation. Her name's Rachel Mallison, and she sort of is the lead pioneer of studying these crazy subterranean stonefly species. So there's 3 or 4 different species that live up there, and they actually live under the ground. And the way that they were discovered is the local people out there started building cabins and stuff on this floodplain, and they were drilling wells. And once they hooked those wells up to their house, they started to get these crazy looking bugs coming up in their sink. And they would, call and say, I think there's cockroaches coming up out of my. Well, they weren't cockroaches. They were these really cool species of subterranean stoneflies like Cathraperla and Isocapnia. They have these really weird physiology where they can withstand super, super low oxygen because they are down there where there's very little flow. There's basically no sunlight that they ever experience because they're under the earth. So they never really darken up. They always have this sort of like blonde beige-ish look. They're very soft. They're very strange. They're totally weird. But it's just kind of interesting to know that when you're lacing up your boots by the car, there could actually be stoneflies right underneath your feet before you even get to the river.
Right.
So,
well, what is the family? Are there any more aquatic ones we'd see out there that are in the same family or of those guys?
These are definitely not important to any angler.
No, we're not using these guys.
You don't need to match this in your fly box ever.
Okay. This is good. Definitely useless bug fact. Love it. This is great.
It's totally useless, but it's cool. All right, moving on. All right, talking about midges. Now I'm getting into the portion of the talk where we're going to talk like more specific hatches. Talking about midges, again, like I said, this is super important in the winter time. Jackson really talked about how midges are tolerant to different types of pollution. So if you have a river full of midges, it can be indicative of slightly less high quality water. Midges can be super, super tiny in like talking down size 20 to size 26 sometimes is important to match them. Yeah, it's a fun thing to do throughout the winter, but I think all anglers kind of look forward to getting to the next good hatch that comes out in the spring because they're finicky, they're super small, but sometimes they can produce really amazing dry fly fishing opportunities. Moving on, we're going to talk about a bunch of mayflies now, specific species of mayflies, starting, with the first ones that come off, and that would be the Western March Brown. This is one of those clinger nymphs, so they're adapted to living in super fast water, and the way that they emerge is just like Jackson said, that the nymphs will kind of swim up. Sometimes they tend to go up and down multiple times before they fully hatch. And they sometimes even hatch right below the surface and they get kind of stuck and then they break their way through. So oftentimes fishing wet flies for this particular species can be really good. They're about a size 14 or so. Yeah, and also the nymphs are important to fish well before the hatch. The nymphs will start to move around sometimes even a month before the hatch, and it can be really effective to fish kind of a size 14 darker, maybe like a pheasant tail style nymph to target this particular species. And next, we've got the blue wing olive. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this is probably the most important mayfly species to have an imitation of in your box. And I would suggest having many different types of imitations because trout see a lot of this particular type of bug. They occur across the whole country. This is a very, very important mayfly. You can tell a blue wing olive apart from many of the other types of mayflies because they have a very, very small hind wing. So if you look at the adult here, this tiny little bump right here is the hind wing, and this forewing is really the most prevalent thing. And they also, as the adult, they only have two tails. And when you have those things in combination, you're probably looking at a blue wing olive. Blue wing olives are multi-brooded, so you don't only get a hatch in the springtime, but you get another hatch in the fall. The ones that come out in the spring are like a size 18, sometimes even a size 16. And the ones that come out in the fall are a little bit smaller, like a 20 or a 22. They're called blue wing olives because the wings are kind of this bluish gray, olive colored body. And they are super important to fish the emergence of and the dun phase. There's almost no importance, though, to fish the spinner fall of blue wings because they don't tend to actually fall on the surface of the water. Those fully formed adults will crawl under and lay their eggs. So really just for anglers, focus in on the emergence and, fishing the nymphs before the hatch. It's very important to fish emergers and cripples right during the hatch. And then you can get away with a full, dun style right in the middle of a hatch. All right, next we've got the green drake. This is kind of like the big mayfly that comes out in the summer around where we're from. This is a really fun hatch to fish because the big fish in the river focus in on this one. One thing that I've noticed about green drakes is they have a very sort of weird color change. So when they first emerge, they're this sort of pale olive, almost yellowish color. And then the moment they come off the water, they sort of turn brown. So a lot of the patterns that you see don't resemble the bug, that you might pick up on the side of the river. And that's because as they're exoskeleton hardens and oxidizes, it gets darker. But fishing the duns as they're drying their wings, they tend to be much lighter. The emergence happens, mid-afternoon throughout the summertime. It's a pretty big bug, like a size 10 works, size 12 or size 10 can work. And emerger patterns are really good too. These bugs have a hard time sometimes getting through the surface film. So you can fish an emerger and have pretty good luck. All right, talking about pale morning duns, this may be out west. I'm going to say this might be the second most important mayfly to have imitated in your box. That's because they're just very widespread. Their hatch kind of occurs throughout the whole mid part of summer. You've likely seen these bugs out if you've been on any of the major tailwaters or spring creeks. They're very common in those areas. They kind of have this pale yellowish body color to them. There's two different species. One is a little bit larger than the other. One's like a size 14. The other is more like a size 18. And PMDs have this really weird way that they hatch. A lot of them will actually fully turn into the adult before they get all the way onto the surface. And so now you have this sort of mid-hatched bug that's maybe 2 or 3 inches below the surface, struggling to get up to the surface. So again, kind of fishing cripply emerger type patterns can be super, super effective for PMDs in particular. And the spinner fall of PMDs can be super important as well. The spinner fall tends to happen, just after the hatch, sometimes even the following morning. There can be a good, strong PMD spinner fall. And like a rusty brown spinner is probably the best bet. The spinners turn sort of this rusty dark brown color instead of that yellowy color. Okay, and then the last of the mayflies that I'm going to talk about is trico. This is the tiniest little mayfly. They come off midsummer and go into early fall. It's one of the longer hatches, so it will start in the end of summer and go all the way into early fall, and you'll see them almost every morning. The interesting thing about tricos is that it's maybe the only, well, I won't say that. It's one of the only mayfly hatches where the spinner fall really is the main phase that anglers should focus on. Those spinners, they come out in just like enormous numbers, like especially on the Missouri River, there's just clouds and clouds of these things. When the spinners fall, the trout can really key in on them, and it can promote some very, very technical dry fly fishing, some very frustrating dry fly fishing, because you have to compete with like hordes of actual real adults that are on the water, and it can be really challenging, but very rewarding. The way to know that you're looking at a trico is one of the only mayflies that doesn't have a hind wing. So also, if you're looking at a small black mayfly that's like a size 20 or 22, it's probably a trico. But it doesn't have a hind wing, and it's kind of like a short, stout, very stocky bug. The wings make up almost 70% of the body surface, so they have like these robust but single wings on them. All right, transitioning into just a couple of caddis. I'm not going to go into a bunch of different types of caddis because, like I said, for the average day angler, you can really imitate caddis with similar patterns. You just need to tie many different sizes and colors and have them in your box. But one of the first major caddis hatches that happens out west is the Mother's Day caddis. This is a case building caddis, and they come out obviously around Mother's Day. A lot of the rivers where I fish back west, they tend to come out right during runoff, which is kind of a bummer. But in years where they come out just before runoff or just like maybe after it's stabilized, you can have some really fantastic dry fly fishing. These caddis are much darker than most of the other caddis you'll see throughout the summer. So like tie your patterns, with a darker deer hair wing and kind of like a slate gray underbody to properly mimic this species. And then, of course, we'll talk about the spotted sedge. This is the crazy bug that does the stridulation that Jackson talked about. This is a very broad category of caddis. There's many, many different species. They range from size 20 all the way down to size 12. And this is probably the most important caddis, I guess, if we're going to group them together to have matched in your box. It's good to have these sort of like tan, brown caddis in all these different sizes because they are so prevalent and they occur on almost most of our rivers out west. So this is a broad category. Yeah, fish the pupa, like I said, fishing pupa patterns and egg laying patterns using wet flies can be super important as well. Many of the larvae of this particular group are sort of like this lime green color. So, green weenie can be a good fly. But having brighter colored larvae pattern or like woven Polish nymphs can be really good. Okay, we're transitioning now into the stoneflies, starting with our favorite. Obviously, this is our flag species, the giant salmonfly, the largest species of stonefly in the whole world. These are very important bugs and obviously very sought after by anglers. It can be kind of frustrating to fish this hatch because the emergence is incredibly synchronous. So what will happen is almost all of the bugs that are ready to emerge on that year will come off within the same handful of days. And if you don't, if you're not on the river during those days, you've missed your chance. So it's totally hit or miss. And so that's why you have a lot of people that, they'll travel and spend weeks to make sure that they hit this hatch. Again, like I said before, fishing the nymphs before the hatch can be super important in the sides of the river. What else do I want to say about salmon flies?
What do you think, James? What do you think is the most famous, if you had to pick one, Western river for these out in your area, at least in Montana? Is there one that just has this huge salmon fly hatch?
Yeah, I mean, the Madison is probably most well known for it, but there's huge hatches that happen on the Deschutes River, Henry's Fork River. I mean, this is a very famous bug. And like I said, each river has its own thermal cue, and you can sort of bounce around multiple rivers if you know when, or you can predict when the hatch is going to occur. And so you maybe can hit it for a few days on one river, take a road trip, and then another river. Oh, one thing we should talk about is that these bugs have a 4-year life cycle. So unlike a lot of the mayflies and caddis, where they just live as the larvae or the nymph for 1 year, these bugs will spend 4 years under the water and they'll grow over that time. So you can fish a salmonfly nymph that's like a size 14, but you're actually fishing like a 2-year-old bug. Or you could fish a size 6, and that would be a bug that is about to hatch that year. So they come in a bunch of different sizes, but only every 4 years does one actually hatch. All right, next group is the golden stonefly. So this is another large-bodied stone that comes out right after the salmonfly's hatch. This hatch happens much longer than the salmonfly hatch does. So oftentimes you won't actually see a very prolific golden stone hatch. They'll just sort of be out in the environment throughout the summertime. And that's why fishing a kind of a bigger golden dry fly throughout the summer can be a really good searching pattern. So you can sort of cover a lot of water and fish these, even though you're not seeing them in the sky. It can be a very effective way to cover a lot of water quickly and catch some fish that way. The nymphs of this species are voracious predators. I remember doing some research and watching them stalk up on little blue-wing olive nymphs and just chowing down on them. They're definitely the top predators of the macroinvertebrate community. And then we've got yellow sallies. This is another sort of broad category. A lot of people call yellow sallies, or a lot of species fall into this yellow sally group. They're all just a little bit smaller, and they occur throughout the summertime on most of our western rivers. Some species are yellow, like the name suggests, but then some species are also like bright green, and that would be more of this like Chloropurlidae group. They're sort of like small bright green stoneflies. And even some of the yellow sallies form this sort of weird red back half of their abdomen. And if you want to get really into matching the hatch, you can tie a fly that's sort of half yellow, half red. And that can be a good way to properly match that. But, the best way to fish this particular hatch is to just have a variety of body colors in your box and try and catch a few of the naturals and match those as best as you can. And then last one that I want to talk about is the nocturnal or mutant stones. This is one of my favorites. This is a group of stoneflies that come out sort of right at the end of summer and early fall. And they have a fun name, nocturnal mutant. They come out in the middle of the night, and the adults don't like the sunlight, so they will hide underneath the rocks. So it's very hard to sort of see a hatch occurring. The best way is to go out during the day and flip over some rocks right on the bank, like not in the water, but next to the water. And you'll find these little weird mutant looking stoneflies that run away from the sun. And that's these bugs. The males never actually grow fully sized wings. And the best way to fish them is to go out in the middle of the night or right before the sun comes up and fish skittering stonefly patterns. Color doesn't really matter, right? Because you're in the middle of the night, so the fish can't see so well. But they do cue in on the fact that these bugs really skitter along the surface. So skating a fly can be really effective, and it's a really fun thing to fish. Okay, this is our last bug fact of the day. What you can see here is a mayfly nymph, and it's ventilating its abdominal gills right now. This is how they breathe. They're basically generating flow around those gills on the abdomen to flush out the deoxygenated water and then provide new, fresh oxygenated water so it can breathe. And it poses the question, or one question that people may think about is, why are there no stoneflies in lakes and ponds? But there are mayflies, there's caddis, there's midges. And the fact, or the answer to that question is that stoneflies don't have the ability to ventilate their gills like this. This is like a passive ventilation that they do. They have this adaptation that allows them to generate flow around those gills. But stoneflies, they don't have that ability. They basically just have to acquire the oxygen directly through the walls of their body or through their gills, but they can't move the gills. So that's why they need flowing water basically to breathe. The flow is their inhale and their exhale.
And the stoneflies, you have those tufts, the gills around their legs. Those are the gills on the stoneflies?
Yeah, they occur at different locations on different. Yeah, some species don't have any gills, but like salmonflies have these gills that occur right on the middle parts of their thorax.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, cool. So yeah, you'll never find a stonefly in a still water, but you'll occasionally see some mayflies and caddisflies.
I think there's like one or two species that are adapted to live in very deep lake. I think like Lake Tahoe or some lakes in Russia have like one or two species of stonefly. But besides that, no, stoneflies they require flowing water to breathe. Okay. Yeah, kind of interesting. Doesn't matter so much for your angling, but it's just interesting.
It's a great,
Jackson.
Great bug fact. Do you guys have like a list of 100 top bug fun useless facts? Should make one if you don't have it yet.
We should make one of those books you read while you're on the toilet.
Exactly. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. So that's the end of the talk. Basically, the portion of the talk that is about the entomology. I did want to sort of highlight this one other opportunity that we have, which is an angler survey. So if any of you listening are longtime anglers and you have noticed things on your local rivers, you let's say you take journal notes and you have good observations on different hatches, that sort of information is super valuable to us. And we'd love it if you take 5 minutes and fill out this survey. And of course, if any of you have the capacity to become a member, we would love to have you as a member of the Salmonfly Project. We're a very small new organization, and your membership will go a really long way.
Awesome.
But with that, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for listening, learning about bugs. I hope this was fun. Maybe
Amazing.
you have some questions.
Yeah, this has been great, guys. That was like totally more than I was expecting. I think you guys definitely, that was epic. I mean, both ends. We covered both. We got the first half and then got into the fishing. So this is great. And I think we're going to do a little bit of a Q&A. So if anybody has any questions that are lingering, go ahead and post those in the comments, and I'll circle back through those. But I mean, as we got into this, there's so many, I guess, one thing I want to highlight, the Bug Fest, coming up in July. So July 25th, Bug Fest. Again, talk about a little bit about what that is, if people can attend. Is that going to be one of your flagship events or one of the big events you guys are doing this summer?
Yeah. Bug Fest is an in-person angler entomology event. It's going to happen out at $3 Bridge on the Madison on July 25th. It's going to be, our biggest event to date. We're going to have 3 different stations. So if you come out for a day of fishing, you can spend maybe an hour with us, and before you fish, we'll look at the nymphs, we'll look at drifters and emergers that are in the water column, and then we'll even look at some of the adults that are out there. And then to sort of pair with that, we're also going to have some very famous fly tyers out there imitating the bugs that we find. So there'll be some tying, there'll be some learning. There'll probably be a beer here and there. It'll be a good time.
Well, beverages. Yeah. And Craig, one of our favorite guests we've had on the podcast, Craig will be there, right?
Yes. Craig Matthews will be there tying flies.
Yep. And he's got that guy's filled with stories as well about his history working out of it. I think he was he the sheriff or something in town, right?
In West. Yeah.
In West. Yeah.
Yeah. He was to Yellowstone and then made a fly shop, and he's a cool guy.
Yeah, definitely. And that's awesome. So this is going to be a great event. We're going to definitely be hitting it because it's right over the same time we're going to be out near on the Missouri. And we got lots of great presentations. Old Dirty said, this was rad. You guys skipped the best hatch though. So I'm not sure what he's talking about. Maybe comment on which hatch.
Oh, I'd love to know which hatch.
I can't think of which one. Definitely, those are all the big ones I can think of. And so we had, some other random comments here. We had talking about the best size of, just a comment on one of your things. It says the best size for stoneflies are 8 and 10s, even for trophy stonefly streams. So do you guys find that there's a common size, regardless of what bugs are hatching, that works really effectively for stoneflies?
Well, I think it depends on the particular, if you're going to match a particular stonefly, then yes, right? Like each bug had its own size range. Like for instance, I was out on the upper Colorado a couple of days ago, and this time of year you have the golden stones that are molting. And so fishing like a size 14 or 12, even though the adult bug is much bigger, but fishing, a slightly smaller version of that bug can be super effective because that's the size that the nymphs are this time of year. They haven't grown to full size yet.
Gotcha. Okay. You talked a little bit on the fishing. What do you have as far as maybe a few flies that you think for dries throughout the summer or your go-to patterns? James, it sounds like you're more, you do a little more fishing. Do you have a few, or is your box, do you have like 50 boxes with everything? What's your style?
I mean, I'm kind of a geek about it. Yeah. I can sort of give you broad category things. I am very much a big proponent of the Comparadun style mayflies. So I don't love heavily hackled mayflies. I really like sort of the deer hair wing splayed look, whether it has a trailing shuck or not. I think that is super effective for almost every mayfly hatch. For stoneflies, I suggest something darker and lower floating than everybody else is fishing. Everybody likes to fish the big chubbies and stuff like that with the big poly wing on it. And that can turn some fish off sometimes. I mean, sometimes it works and you need the flotation, and great. I have those too. But if you're getting finicky fish something smaller and darker. And for caddis, more and more, my caddis have just gone to 2 patterns, either an X caddis or a wet fly, just a regular pheasant tail wet fly that covers almost all caddis.
Okay, it's like just with like a wet fly wing, just a little wet fly, like a pheasant,
like
soft tackle.
The soft tackle, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, and just fish it however you nymph it or fish it as a wet fly, however you fish it.
Yep. You can tie it off the bend of the dry. You can put 2 of them and swing them.
Yeah,
you know,
that's it. And the X-Cast was one of Craig's patterns too, right?
Yes. And Craig really made the Comparadon famous with adding the shuck to it. And
he did. Okay. Yeah. Why is the X-Cat is such a great pattern? Well, what is it? Because it's not that, you know what I mean? It's like why is that the one? What does it have?
It's just lower floating. It's got that trailing shuck off the back. And so the fish, I think they cue in on it as an emerging caddis, and they think that they can get to it before it gets away. You know, everybody fishes elk hair caddis, but those are such a fully formed adult that they're too smart for that.
Yeah, and they're sitting like on. I kind of feel it always seems like those flies that are sitting on the surface, ready to get away, are not as good as the ones that are down in the surface, right? It feels like those are the ones that are the better ones to match.
I find, yeah. I mean, any bug that's trapped, the trout knows that as easier food.
We had Bob Lindquist was on Thursday when we started this, and he talked about fishing dry flies, and he has this other presentation that does fishing the underhatch, but he shows this drawing that Dave Whitlock drew like back in the day, and it shows all these bugs from the lower to the top, and almost like 90% of the bugs are right in that part, from not in the surface, they're right in that top little column. Is that pretty much? But there's a lot of like, I guess that's hatching wise, but I mean, still 90%. Is that true too? That most fish are feeding on nymphs for the most part throughout the season.
Yeah, nymphs, like a trout relies on nymphs almost for the vast majority of its diet, for sure.
Cool. Well, one more, and just this is for me, Trichos. We're going to be out there during Bugfest. So Bugfest is on the 25th of July. We're going to be there that next week, and Trichos are going to be on. What's a little fun fact you could tell us about Trichos, maybe that you didn't talk about, that we can understand about their life history? Is that something you guys know as much about Trichos as you do stoneflies and these other flies, or do you know your bugs, certain species, more than others?
Trichos love to live in more still water habitats.
Okay.
They really like pools. So if you're, when we're doing our monitoring, and if we sample riffles, you can get hardly any trichos, and then you move to like slow water habitat that's not great for a lot of the other bugs that we tend to think about, whether that's, green drakes or most of the stoneflies. Then all of a sudden you're getting this different community of trichos. They like that siltier environment. So when it comes to duns, and those are a lot less important than the spinners, as we already talked about. But that's where the emergence typically occurs. And then they, come up, and then the spearfall happens, and that can happen in a variety of, over a variety of kinds of water. That's one thing that came to mind. I don't know how relevant that is to fishing. I don't think it's as relevant as some of the other facts James shared, but one little thing.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
love it.
A good thing. The only other thing that I can think of is based off their like nymphal ID. They're one of the only mayfly nymphs that have these really pronounced triangular like things that come off the back. So right at the back of the abdomen, they have this really weird triangular shape. And from what I can tell, the nymphs, even though, I mean, they're small bugs no matter what you look at it, but the nymphs almost in a weird way feel bigger than the adults.
Yeah, okay. Much. And you almost can't even see their head. Their head looks teeny tiny. They're basically just like a flying thorax with wings.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because they're tiny, right? They're 20s or 22s.
Yeah. They're really itty bitty.
Amazing. Cool. Jeff asked, he said, is that why you like the Comparadon? Does it float a little lower? I guess back to the question we're talking about. Is that why the Comparadon is so good? Floating lower?
Yeah. I think having the Comparadon sit a little bit lower, but then also I think people just overdo it with hackle. Yeah. There's only 6 legs on a mayfly, and they're pretty dainty. Yeah. And if you look at a very heavily hackled fly, kind of, to me, it looks a little unnatural.
Yeah, a little natural. Is the Comparadon imitating mayflies and caddisflies? A lot of different things?
No, Comparadon is really, like the name says, just the dun. To imitate duns. Yeah.
That's it. So it is just different types of mayflies. Okay. It looks like Old Dirty, he said the bat hatch. So I guess that was the hatch we missed. So I think he's talking about something else. So he was kind of joking. So you guys, I think, did cover all the hatches, right?
We certainly didn't cover all the hatches.
Especially we didn't touch the East Coast ones, so.
Yeah.
That's right. This is Western focus, right? Okay, well, maybe we'll have to follow up with you guys when you start heading out east. But yeah, as we head out of here, so we mentioned Bugfest. Where else can people track you down? Where should we send people? We've got the surveys we highlighted. just go to your website, check in with that. Would that be a good next step?
Yeah, definitely go onto our website. We have an events page, like a calendar that shows where we're going to be, having presentations. And besides Bugfest, we do a lot of local small angler entomology clinics that are out on the water. Bugfest is like a mega version of that. So all the areas where we have projects, at least once a year, we're holding some kind of on the water free clinic, talking about a lot of the stuff we touched on today, but on the water, looking at bugs, hunting them down, pulling them out of the water. So that's pretty fun. We have a lot of webinars too. We have one coming up here at the end of March. And that's another opportunity for people to listen to Salmonfly Project results. We didn't talk about any of our science here today.
Oh, cool.
But, that's mostly what we do is,
right.
monitoring research of aquatic insects relevant to conservation. So we talk about that in the webinars. We have education stuff in the webinars. We have a lot of guest speakers come, that are always very, they can be other entomologists or super buggy kind of sciencey anglers. You mentioned Craig. He's a great candidate for a webinar.
Okay,
so
Craig. Yep.
There's multiple avenues for interactions.
Perfect. Or Rick Hafley, I think on the podcast we mentioned that he's an old friend of the podcast, and somebody actually in the notes said something about Hafley. He said that Hafley at the last presentation Hafley did, he eats a bug every time. I'm not sure if that's true, but are you partaking in that same sort of line out there?
Not every time, but I've eaten my fair share.
You eat some bugs. All right.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you got it.
You have to eat a salmonfly at least.
You have to. Yeah, you got to feel the crunch, or it's that thing you got to do.
And most of the nymphs, they taste like if you like seafood, it tastes like,
really?
Like a raw.
So they're pretty good.
Shrimp. It's pretty because I don't like raw shrimp, but it's
okay.
It's pretty pungent.
There you go. So for those that haven't tried a big juicy bug, we should all do that this year. That'd be a great next step.
Go eat a big caddis larvae. It's
awesome.
Pretty wild.
Cool. Well, let's see. Well, I think that's probably good, guys. This has been amazing. I'll let you guys get out of here. We got some good stuff going. Your podcast we did is going to be going live next month, and we're going to hopefully be following up with you on more to keep track of everything we have going. And so thanks, everyone. I just want to thank you guys for sure and everybody who was on today. And this will be on the replay, so flyfishingbootcamp.com if anybody wants to check out. We do have one presentation tonight at 6 p.m. Pacific time, streamers about trout. James Garrettson is going to be. And I just saw a photo of him that he finds big fish. So we didn't even talk about some of the where to find big fish. Maybe that'll be for the next one with you guys to talk more about that. But thanks again for all your time, and we'll stay in touch with you.
Thanks so much, Dave.
Thanks for having us.
Hope you enjoyed that Fly Fishing Boot Camp live replay. Like I said, if you want to check out the full video, you can do that right now. wetflyswing.com/Salmonfly Bootcamp right now. Check in with them. If you haven't already, we mentioned it in the show notes. There's an angler survey going on right now. You just fill out a 5-minute survey there. Also, if you get a chance, this is an important nonprofit here. If you want to support them, they're just really getting going. Like they said, every little bit counts. So check out the member area and see if you can sign up. They got a bunch of bonuses you get when you get access to their membership. And we also mentioned Bugfest. That's a big one. Bugfest is coming up July 25th. I'd love to meet you in person. We'll be there. And so check into that as well. Lots going on right now. Hope you enjoyed this boot camp. If you want to get more information on Wetfly Swing Pro, you can do that right now, wetflyswing.com/pro. All right. Hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you on the next one. Hope you have a great morning, afternoon, or evening, and have a good day out there.